There are people, young and old, perhaps some in this meeting tonight, and you never think of the Lord. You rise up and you rush out to school or out to work. You go through the day, you come home, you eat a meal, you go to bed. You rise up the next day, you rush out to school, rush out to work. You go through the day, you come home, you eat a meal, you go to bed, you do the same thing the next day and the next day and the next day, and God is not in your thoughts. Never stop to think about the Lord's mercy. Never stop to think of the very fact that your next breath, as Nebuchadnezzar was reminded, and Belshazzar was reminded, that their next breath is in the hand of the Lord, and He can withhold it. You never think that way. There's no fear of God. There are many, and they would never call themselves atheists. They would never deny the existence of God. But they live as practical atheists because they never acknowledge the existence of God either. They never factor God into their lives. There's no fear of God with them. That's what James is driving at in these verses. We need to live in the fear of God. We need to live understanding that we are dependent upon Him. That He is the God with whom we have to do. That He is the God we will stand before on that day of judgment. We need to live in the fear of God. Now, this fear of God is a result of the new birth. When Paul wrote to Romans, in Romans chapter 3, he noted of the natural man, there is no fear of God before their eyes. He's talking about those who do not seek after God, those who have no righteousness of their own, those who are unsaved. And he says there's no fear of God before their eyes. That's the state of natural man. Left to himself, no man fears God. There's no reverence, no respect, no regard for Him. God doesn't feature in his thinking. Man lives for himself. Therefore, this godly fear that James is dealing with comes as a result of salvation. When a person is born again of the Holy Ghost, his entire view of God and his entire relationship to God changes. He honors God. He considers God. He loves God. He begins to fear God. He wants to obey God. He has a desire to honor God and seek God with all his heart. This fear of God is the result of the new birth. Furthermore, this fear of God is the beginning of true wisdom. Solomon was the wisest of men, but he said in Proverbs 1, verse 7, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. It's the fool who discounts God. It's the fool who ignores His word. It's the fool who forgets the Lord's gospel. It's the fool who denies His person. It's the fool who refuses to obey the law. It's the wise person who fears God. And that fearing of God is the beginning of knowledge. It's the beginning of wisdom. The person who fears God considers Him, he follows Him, he knows Him, he walks with Him, he desires Him, he relies upon Him, he trusts Him. He finds his comfort in Him.